Welcome back, everyone, to our Leaders of Inclusive Childcare series, brought to you by CanAssist at the University of Victoria and the Ministry of Education and Childcare. Today's episode is part 2 of Sustainable Leadership in Childcare with Raymond Cauchi. We are joining you today from the traditional territories of the Lekwungen and Wasanic peoples and are grateful to work and play on this land. So building on that staff relationship piece, what kind of tools and strategies would you share for supporting staff strengths and working on areas of growth as well?
The first strategy I recommend would be unabashedly transparent. Do not lie about what you can and cannot do as a manager, as a leader, right? And the reason why is because that transparency and honesty will build trust. And trust is such an interesting word for me now because it's almost not significant enough. Right? Like I trust that cars won't run me down when I cross the street and I have the green light. Okay, fine. But no, this kind of relational trust, this kind of connection that I'm talking about only really manifests when transparency exists. Right? Because you're going to need that kind of reciprocal transparency from them, right? If they can't come to you as a leader and be honest with their current state of affairs, so to speak, you're going to completely be misreading everything all the time. You will be getting inaccurate information. So that's my first one. Be as transparent as you possibly can. And then be as safe as you possibly can. Be a space or bring the space with you or generate the vibe, whatever language you want to use, right? That when you're engaging with your team, they should feel comfortable enough to mock you.
I like that.
And I say it that way because you will always have a significant power dynamic over them. You will always have more power than them, right? All right. And so, for example, when you think about humor and when you think about social work combined with humor, which is a really interesting topic. Love to talk about that too. You can never punch down, right? You can only punch up, right? But people only feel safe punching up, one, when they themselves have their own power, right? Or trust of the person they're punching towards, right? In that sense, making a joke of, right? And should you be mocked by your own staff? Okay. You probably deserved it. Don't take it personal, like.
Well, I think humor has such a place in childcare and
Absolutely.
in any sort of educational setting. We have to be able to joke with one another, especially when there are those power dynamics at play. I think when you're only at a place where you can be completely serious 100% of the time, there is no trust building. So I think humor has a huge place, I think, in childcare.
I firmly believe bring joy to work, right? If there's a way to bring extra joy to the work, bring it, right? Why do kids get to have all the fun? Right? Why is there shame as an adult when I experience joy? There shouldn't be, right? I should want to come to work. It should be a joyous occasion. I should certainly silly things or bad things or whatever you want to, they happen, but the joy should outweigh that more. So those sound so simple, like 3 things, right? Be honest and transparent, right? Be that safe space so that people feel comfortable enough that the power dynamic you have over them becomes almost non-existent or non-felt, right? And bring joy. But they're not simple, right?
And they take time.
They take time, right? As a leader, you will experience a lot of pressure from not only your superiors, but other managers, like other co-leaders, to not do those 3 things. I guarantee it, particularly around the joy, right? Because work is serious business, right? That's how you know it's not play.
I think that's really interesting. And so regarding retention, so I think when you build that culture of trust and safety, I think it's a little bit easier in that regard to kind of talk to your staff about things that they need to grow in. But when you have a program that maybe that trust isn't completely there yet, we have heard from some leaders in the field talking about how they don't want to lose staff. And so they don't necessarily tell their staff what they need to grow in. They kind of just let things happen so that they keep staff. And so what would you recommend for approaching staff with areas they need for growth so that it doesn't seem like you're approaching them in a way that shows that they're failing or doing a bad job?
So I'm going to say this. If as a leader, that is how you feel about that conversation, then they'll feel that way. And at that point, there is not a lot you can do. And the reason why is because that's how your culture is. That's how your organizational culture is, right? Going back to transparency, when I hire someone, I'm upfront. You are expected to grow as a human being. If you stagnate here, you should quit. I will help you find another job, right? If this role that I am hiring you for becomes boring to you, that means that you have mastered skills and need to grow and need to blossom, need to become no longer my tiny little caterpillar, but become that butterfly and go do something else, right? Because that's fundamentally what you're here for. That's one of the reasons why you're fundamentally here from my perspective, right? So every conversation I have with my team always is there's no such thing as a mistake. Not in that colonial, punitive, your life is ruined sense, right? You can make it a mistake as a human being if you choose to keep repeating it, right? In which case we will have to have a conversation, right? And I know where that's going to end. We all know where that's going to end. But if you do, it's not a mistake if you choose to not repeat it, right? So for me, every discussion I have is never about mistakes. It's about growth. It's about why did this happen? It's about was there something that happened that the system supported the decision you made? Was there something that you could have done differently? Was there something I could have done differently? Right? It's about growth, right? So again, going back to your thing, you're right. That kind of conversation doesn't happen without that initial transparency, right? Without that expectation that when you're a part of the team, you will not know everything. You will develop as a human being. My role as your leader in quotes is to help support that, right? So have you guys ever done a piece on types of leadership?
We've done a lot of research on types of leadership, but never a full project on the types.
Okay, so then I'll place myself and leave it at that. So I firmly believe in transformative leadership. I'm not a big transactional person. I'm not a big directional person in the sense of, blah blah blah. No, right? When I ask myself the question, why should anyone do what I tell them to do? The ultimate answer is because they get a benefit out of it. It benefits them to do so, right? So I'm always transformational in focus, right? When it comes to that leadership, I'll make this a bit personal. So for example, I have kids, right? And it was so funny. One time you get in a fight, blah, blah, blah. One of my kids says, "This is crap, Dad. I can't wait for the day that I get to move out." Right? As if he's punishing me. I go, "Great. That means I've done my job. Perfect. When can this happen?" He paused. What does that mean? And I look, my whole goal here is to help you be the best person you can be. And if that means moving out, absolutely. If it doesn't mean moving out because you're not ready, absolutely. So that's kind of my approach to work, right? If you're comfortable working here with my team because you love it, because it's your passion, right? Great. If you want to move on, I will help you do that too.
So if there are people that, they genuinely are comfortable staying for a long period of time, but they want more experiences in leadership in their current role. So say you have an ECE who, they're comfortable being an ECE, but they want to continue their leadership journey in that program. What advice do you have for leaders who are seeing that potential? What kind of tasks or
Ooh,
projects can you give that person?
okay, and now we're deeply delving into my personal thoughts about these kinds of things. So that's my caveat for everyone listening, right? Okay. When you have a team like that, where they recognize that they need more, but you also are limited by the hierarchy of your organization, right? Like you can't have multiple managers, right? So that means you are going to have to now talk about expanding your organization structurally. That's fundamentally what it means, because anything other than that is deeply tokenistic. Right? I'm going to be frank, right? Like, oh, absolutely, you can be in charge of the sandbox. Yeah. Okay. Right. So you're going to have to start thinking about expanding programming, right? And that's a perfectly good conversation to have with someone because it makes them aware of the actual work that's going to be needed to get done for them to have this position, this new responsibility they want. Maybe you need more children, right? Maybe you need more resources, right? Maybe you open a satellite. Maybe they go mobile. But I guarantee if they're asking for something like that, or you're brainstorming something, your company, your organization hasn't even thought of that. Right?
No, I appreciate that honesty. I think, and being transparent with your staff, obviously, is
Yeah.
so important in that case. But I appreciate the honesty because I think that automatically, when someone does want an additional opportunity in a leadership role, something like being in charge of the sandbox is what kind of first comes up. So being mindful of staff and retention and how big of a deal those relationships are, what would you say is the role and even the benefits of empathy in leadership?
So having seen the curriculum, I know that we discuss empathy and sympathy, which is great because that's a conversation on its own.
Mhm.
Because I can feel sad for you, but I cannot agree with you. Right? So that's what we're talking about, this idea of shared emotional experience. Um, so one of the biggest factors, a key factor to burnout, a key factor to unstable mental wellness is a sense of isolation and loneliness, particularly in those moments when people are deeply vulnerable because they have been harmed in some way, because they've been hurt, usually through loss. Just the simple act of sharing that experience with someone is deeply healing and deeply kind. And so, even if you take out the word leadership out of the question, empathy just in itself is an act of shared common human experience. And then, as a leader, when you can do that, when you can be that kind of place for your staff to seek respite, right, to seek that sense of connection with another human being, that's deeply powerful and helps ensure that in the long run they maintain health and capacity to be empathic for other people, right? It's a shared burden functionally. I used to think of a crisis or a harm as kind of a circle, right? Where one person's in the middle, that's the person who has the harm, and they have a circle of people they can share that with through empathy, right? And that functionally shares the burden, but it can only go outward. The moment you start sharing back into the circle, it becomes deeply harmful. So the more people that someone has who they can be empathic with, better, right? So when it comes to leadership, you might be that first contact person in that human being's day. And if you're empathic with them, they might be able to go home and still be empathic with their children, which means that the next day, again, from a purely utilitarian point of view, they could come back and not feel guilty about the fact they were mean to their children, because that will weigh on someone. They will feel shame about that. It will carry through their day until they can resolve it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh my gosh, I'm just thinking of the circle and how that's so important. And I think any time that if you have that crisis and it comes back in, it just exacerbates everything and it
Yeah,
makes it way worse and then burnout and you can't do anything effectively, really.
no, right? Like, so for example, I've had days, so again, personal experience, I've had days where I felt so bad about doing something that it has actively distracted me from my job. I could barely focus on what I was doing because I was so concerned emotionally and spiritually and mentally about the wrong I had done that it made me dysfunctional.
Yeah. We talk a lot in childcare about making programs a safe space for the children. And I think that that is so important. But I don't think we talk enough about making it a safe space for the adults that enter the program as well and what that looks like. And I think empathy has a huge,
Huge.
huge place in that, just being there for people. I think it is so underrated.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right. It's hard to be empathic. I'm going to say it. As much as people want to say it's an inherent talent that all human beings, absolutely, 100%. Yes, yes, yes. But the training happens when you intentionally act to put yourself with someone who is suffering and share their suffering, because the desire to seek suffering, right? That willingness to suffer, that's the training piece, right? There's only certain people that you are willing to suffer with, and usually you put the word loved one around them, right? Oh, it's horrible that my son, I will suffer with you, right? It's more difficult to suffer with a stranger, in quotes, someone who you do not capital L love, right? To share that moment with them. And that's where the skill of it comes in.
Empathy is such a skill that you develop, because if you think even evolution wise, humans avoid any sort of distress. That's just
Yep.
the natural thing we do. And so to be able to actively seek that out with someone is the skill. And I think that a lot of people who may not see themselves as super empathetic, they just kind of accept that and maybe see that as a weakness. But I think we can learn to be empathetic, and we can learn how to support people in that way. And it's not just something that you're born with.
No, it's
Yeah.
just you can train it, you can build it, you can develop it. Yeah. But
Yeah.
there's okay, so on that side, right, flipping back to self-care, there's a cost to empathy.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, there is.
Okay. Right. And so, for example, if we go back to, I don't know if it's still popular, but I was, when I was doing one of my degrees, we would talk about introverts and extroverts and what the difference is, right? So as an introvert, when I'm empathic, I literally have to go and isolate myself after, right? To recoup, right? And so that's the thing too, right? You going back to self-care, you need that. Otherwise you cannot do that piece, that empathic piece. It's just not possible.
Yes, and in this field, it is such a caring field for others that we have to really focus on that self-care piece. And in our behavior in the early years training, we do talk about compassion fatigue and how that is such a huge thing in this field for everyone, not just
Yeah.
leaders. And so we really have to think about ourselves. Even though we're told it's selfish to think about ourselves, we really do need to think about ourselves.
I want to clap for that. I know, 100%. And I hope that, so for example, I hope that on my current team where I work, that if I am ever kind of like hypocritical about this stuff, they will call me out. They'll be like, yo, Cauchi, you said self-care is important. So I need this. Why are you whining about it?
And that's when you know you have a good staff culture.
Like, oh yeah, I am whining. Okay, fine.
Exactly. They hold you accountable. That's good.
Yeah, right? That should be able to happen. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you so much, Raymond, for being here. Truly, this has been absolutely incredible, and we really appreciate your insights. And thank you so much for doing the work too.
Of course, no, yeah, no. Thank you for this opportunity. It was a lot of fun. This is actually really enjoyable.
Thank you for tuning in to part 2 of Sustainable Leadership in Childcare with Raymond Cauchi. Next week's episode is Supporting Children's Needs as a Leader with special guest Carrie Rickards, where we will discuss inclusive leadership approaches to meet the needs of children in our programs. Look for that on Wednesday of next week. And until then, thank you for your support and take care.